Right, we are live. Welcome to the Why Carbs Won't Make You Fat podcast. Josh and Nick are here and we're ready for episode number 6. So, how are we going, Josh?
Very good. Yeah, had a day off yesterday, but it's been a pretty busy week at work, and also had today. I booked today off because last night I went to see a Russian death metal band in London.
Yeah, I saw
So
that.
yeah, so that was really
Noisy.
good fun. Yeah, Ben was there,
Yeah,
Mr. Glasscock, and yeah, about they had one. There was only them headlining, no support acts or anything like that, and they hadn't been in the UK for probably about 8 or 9 years or something, and their singer has the most ridiculous guttural vocals. He sounds like a bear,
okay.
and so
That's
it was
like a bear.
good to see that live, and it was really good. But other than that, yeah, mostly just been working at FOF. We're doing a 90-day transformation thing with new members and stuff like that. So I've been going through plenty of food diaries, making notes and suggestions, and also taking care of the already existing members with
Nice.
their nutritional needs. And so it's been a pretty full-on week, and coaching-wise has been getting the hours in on that as well, which has been good.
Nice. What would you say is the most common thing you see in those food diaries that you're wanting to give feedback on?
Well, they don't eat enough protein or don't eat enough
Mm.
in general. Um, and yeah, there are a few outliers who have kind of tried to be a bit more informed with their decisions, but a majority of the stuff they're getting from their getting about sorry, majority of the stuff they're getting information wise is just things on Instagram, which on one hand is useful, but there's already so many things out there, it's makes it
Mm.
even confusing for them. So had a call with a client today, and that's pretty much what he's based all of his nutritional uh, information off of, and he's had success and like gone from a high body fat percentage and got it lower and things like that, and he's developed some good lean muscle and just needs a bit more guidance and accountability, and someone to sift through the shit, if you want to call it that, that's out there. And so hopefully that's what I can do for him. So, yeah.
Nice. Good. Cool. Right, Nick, how's it going? First week back in the office?
First week back, first full week. So
Yeah.
it's a bit like footballers in pre-season. Get the yards in the legs, and then you're off and running. I did not go and see a death metal Russian band this week. I wouldn't even know
Probably
where
not
to
with your
start.
pregnant wife,
I
I'd
wouldn't even
imagine.
I wouldn't even know where to start with that, to be honest.
It was a really wholesome show. He's a nice guy.
Was it? I can
Probably, it
imagine.
probably is. In fact.
I can imagine. Yeah, first week back at work. Luckily, I work from home 4 days a week, and then one day in the office. Yeah, sadly, my main job is not very exciting. So I don't know if I've ever said I work for a bank, so I'm a
Right.
financial promotions risk manager for a bank,
Hmm.
which is kind of like the legal side of marketing. So it's
Right.
a bit
Okay.
dull, but it pays the mortgage.
Right. So it's a real
Um,
job, unlike Josh and I's little
you're living
playing
the
it live.
dream instead of
Living the
I'm the
dream.
corporate whore that just
Yeah.
goes in the office. Yeah, first week back was pretty good. The standard kind of chat in the office when it comes to January time.
Okay. What gems have they? What gems have you uncovered in the office then?
Luckily, the people that I work with are pretty good. Um,
Mhm.
it's come with time, but the gems that we always used to have is like seeing people coming in January with some sort of special K bar for breakfast that's
Hmm.
like 100 calories and
Yeah.
18 grams of sugar or whatever it is, nonsense.
Hmm.
And then they'd be all optimistic that was going to be their way forward, and they've read this is going to work. And you're like, you see them in an hour's time, and they're just eating everything they can find because they're so hungry. But
Yeah.
it's that whole thing, isn't it, of like not eating enough, which is sometimes counterintuitive when people want to lose weight. But also something that just Josh touched on is like people just don't eat enough protein.
Hmm.
And the one kind of thing I've heard a lot, and I hear it from work, and I hear it from friends and family, the minute you start talking protein, people start going, yeah, but I don't want to get muscly.
Yeah.
My goal isn't to put on muscle. And I was like, hang on, I eat protein, and my goal is to put on muscle, and
I'm
I
trying
still
my
can't do
nuts off
it. So, I'm struggling, and I'm
Mm.
trying. So yeah, it's really trying to like move over that kind of roadblock of it's not about turning into a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
It's
100%.
looking at it more from it'll just keep you full, and then you won't get to 10 o'clock and be at the vending machine, getting a bag of Maltesers or whatever it is.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I actually, with the protein thing, I wrote an article about this because I listened to the Diary of a CEO podcast with Tim Spector,
Well done.
partly well done. Yeah, partly in prep for doing our own podcast, really. And I chewed my way through it. I took the dog for a walk. Luckily, we live in the middle of nowhere. I found myself sort of swearing along. And the problem with it is that he seems quite credible. He has a PhD, he's incredibly intelligent, and basically he should know better because he knows a lot of the stuff he's saying is slightly misleading, but he's trying to sell a product. So he's kind of glossing over it a little bit. They make a statement in the podcast where he said, most people in the UK get plenty of protein.
Yeah.
And
I remember
look
that bit.
at the if you want to look at the article and get all of the context, it's on my website, foodflexibility.co.uk. Is too much protein making you fat? Which was his claim, but basically he very, very quickly sort of caveats that and glosses over the fact that if you're in a calorie surplus, because too much protein won't make you fat, too much of anything won't make you fat unless you eat too many calories. And the claim is that most people get enough protein, and they do statistically get enough protein to avoid clinical deficiency. So if you lived in Africa and you're unfortunate enough to be very, very poor and live in famine conditions, you probably don't get enough protein from the grain that you are given by UNICEF because you're starving. And you're likely to be clinically deficient in protein. In the Western world, it's very, very difficult, provided you're not living in poverty, to not have enough protein to be clinically sufficient, i.e., so that your organs don't stop working and you have medical problems. The problem with that is a well-recognized, researched amount of protein is a lot higher than what the clinically sufficient dose is, because it keeps you fuller for longer, looks after your bone density, and helps you build a little bit of muscle, which as you age means that you're more independent. So that's all the context around it, and it hacks me off a little bit that someone who knows all of that, and he says, he does, to give him his credit, he says in the podcast, oh, unless you're a bit older, which isn't a lot of context. And the whole reason I wrote the article, I met a lady doing a free nutrition talk. She listened to the podcast, history of not wanting to gain any body fat, slightly iffy relationship with food and body image. Menopausal, knew that she needed to strength train to look after her bone density in menopause because that deteriorates unless you do that. Wouldn't eat more protein than that small amount to preserve her bone density, to help her gain muscle, because Tim Spector said that's not okay. And it's going to make her fat. And sadly, I had an hour with her and I couldn't convince her that that wasn't necessarily the case. So that made me sad. But
I think that what you touched on there about in later life, that's the golden one for me, in terms of if you want to preserve your mobility when you get to a later stage of life, you want to cling on to the muscle that you can find. So there's someone in my family who was doing what was it they called it, the Michael Mosley Fast 800 diet.
Yeah.
Now it turned out they were doing it from a point of I think they were told by the doctor they were nearing diabetic levels. So they saw this diet. So it was a bit of like a kind of, I want to come as far back from that as I can. This seems pretty good. They just went off and did it. But when you look at it, I won't go into detail, but Fast 800 is like you eat 800 calories on Sundays and fast. Yeah, it's
really
piss poor. Yeah, it's awful.
It works.
But yeah, it does work. But it's the same way of going. It's you maybe don't need to go that extreme to
no, unless your health is in serious risk.
I was just about to say, for the context of like where he was, it was kind of, okay for what he was doing. But one of the things I noticed of it is you kind of lose weight, but I wonder how much of that is muscle mass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, people just think that you lose weight and that's a good thing, but where that is coming from. Now, he's quite an active older guy, does gardening, walks, all the rest of it. But you can't help feel like the problem you're solving on the one hand, you're creating on the other by doing that kind of diet.
Yeah.
And the same as you said, you can talk to these people as much as you want.
So Nick, actually, like explain the physiology of that, because I don't think people will realize. People who don't have a strong background in nutrition will realize if you eat fewer calories, you're not necessarily just burning body fat, are you?
No, so it's not necessarily. I can't. Yeah, I wish I could explain the deep, medical side of it, but basically, how I see that the body works is muscle is always going to be a more your body's going to look at muscle as a source of energy.
It's going to
before it starts looking at fat. So the problem you've got is unless you're kind of providing your body with what it needs to sustain the muscle, if the balance is out and the body starts using muscle for energy, but you're not replenishing with protein to get the replenishment, you will start losing muscle mass in your body. So that will show as a decrease in weight on the scales, but it's not where you probably want that weight loss to come from.
No.
So over time, it will become harder and harder to do simple things, like the gardening, like walking, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, weight loss isn't always a good thing in those circumstances.
Exactly. And so Nick's about to talk about slimming clubs, and I know you've got an alternative approach, but one of the things that some slimming clubs do that I don't particularly like is there isn't really a focus on protein. It's a focus on the scale going down. And that's a problem because having a high muscle mass is very beneficial for your health. As you get older, your muscle declines naturally. You can counteract that by weight training and eating sufficient protein. Also, if you've got an aesthetic goal, if you chisel off all of the fat, but you don't have much of a muscle base below that, I'll use this example because it's the one I can think of. You end up looking like Christian Bale in The Machinist rather than Christian Bale in Batman. And you probably, if you're a guy, want to look like Christian Bale in Batman, not in The Machinist. That's the difference. And if you don't know what that looks like, I'm sure you can Google search those two images and see what the difference is.
Yeah.
It's a good example.
Yeah. It's in there from back in the day, reading website articles and understanding the benefit of protein.
I can remember one of the things that hit me about the protein side of it is something that was in our BTN course with, I think it was Tom that was talking about protein levels. And there's a difference between hitting your minimum protein level and existing and eating the higher level and thriving.
Yes.
There's two massive different things there. And it's trying to get people to understand, you can hit the minimum, but we can do better. And chances are you can start to feel better for that. So that was the one thing I took away from that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's about, so clinical sufficiency is all about surviving. But if you want to optimize, then, have this mindset of thrive, don't survive. Feel yourself like an athlete, even if you're not, because guess what? Athletes tend to be relatively healthy outside of competitive, competition and stuff, but they feel themselves well, all of that good stuff. Right. So on that note, tell us a little bit about your take on slimming clubs, Nick.
So this may get me banished from the nutrition circle, so I do apologize to everyone.
No, go on. I like it.
I am going to bookend this kind of little piece with, and this is always the important thing, I am not saying that this is perfect. I'm not saying it's optimal.
No.
Anything like that. So before we get going, just to put that one out there, this isn't, a perfect solution. But I wanted to talk about slimming clubs. And I think the main one I wanted to talk about was Slimming World. Because they're obviously, I think in the UK, they're probably like the biggest
Right.
group out there. Everyone is probably aware of them. Everyone's got one nearby and that kind of thing. So I want to do a little talk about Slimming World. I've seen them in the social media again recently. But in terms of Slimming World, a quick bit of an overview of how they work. I think we've all kind of probably heard of, you know, the meetings and that kind of thing. But in terms of what they actually do is they split food into different categories. So you'll have free foods, which they say is foods you can eat as much as you want. There's what they call healthy extras. And I think there's healthy extras like A and B. Or some people in the industry call them Hex A and Hex B. I've learned this.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know.
Every day's a school day.
There's speed foods and there's sins, right? So that's how they split their foods.
Spelled SYN because it's not.
Yes.
It's a made up.
Because it stands for synergy, not what you
Of course
think
it
is.
does. Yeah, of course it does. Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's not talk about the fact we all know what they're doing. It is because their old marketing actually had a pair of devil's horns in the Slimming World logo. So if you apply sin to devil horns, I think we all know where they were going with that. But yeah, they say now it's synergy and all this kind of stuff. So free foods are the ones they say you can eat as much as you want, which obviously comes with a bit of an issue. Not an issue, but maybe if you've got people that are struggling with weight management, saying you have an unlimited you had unlimited access to these foods maybe isn't the right way of doing it, but that's what they do. And examples of free foods are actually, there's quite a wide ranging list. So there's a number of different lean proteins, bacon, beef mince, even like grouse, guinea fowl, this kind of stuff. Some, you know, proteins in there, which is good. Plant-based proteins, corn, tofu, and then you get into kind of, there's other ones where it comes into pasta and rice and that kind of stuff. This is where I kind of get a bit, okay, you're telling people you can eat as much pasta as you want and rice. I think they probably do it on the basis of you can only eat so much of this stuff before you get full up, and it's providing a bit of freedom and that kind of thing. So there's your free foods. Your healthy extras are kind of, I think they split it into a healthy extra A is like milk and cheese and dairy products, and you limit those to certain quantities. And then your healthy extra B, I've got it in front of me because I was going to forget.
Not surprised.
There's so much of it. It's stuff like your carbs, so you know, breads, porridge, that kind of thing, and it kind of gives you weights for each of those things.
But not pasta.
You can have whole grain pasta. So it's basically these seem to be more like the whole meal type stuff, you know, the slower releasing and that kind of thing. And then speed foods are like vegetables and fruits, but it's the vegetables and fruits that are cucumber, celery. Basically, it's like water-based fruits and vegetables. So they're saying you can use speed foods to bulk up meals, and they say it will speed up weight loss. Again, I don't agree with that, but there's no bad thing with bulking out meals with fruit and veg. So, you know, happy days. And then you've got your sins, and these sins are your kind of, you know, the stuff that's apparently on the naughty list that you kind of limit to a certain quantity. So you get certain points that you can use towards sins, and it just means that you're not, you know, going mad on those on a day-to-day basis. So it's all quite complicated, and it took me a while to get my head around it. But when you look at it, they're the same as any other type of thing where they're trying to push you in a direction of a certain way of eating, because they provide lists for each of these, and the lists are all fruits and veg, good carb sources, proteins, and all this kind of thing. So they are encouraging people to go in the right direction, which I don't mind. Now, this does sound confusing, but I was thinking about this in terms of they get a lot of criticism because people go, oh, they have such a confusing way of, you know, nutrition and this kind of stuff. So what you want to do is don't go with Slimming World, come with me. And someone goes, okay, I'll come with you, Mr. PT. right, what I want to talk to you straight away is macro splits. And you're going, all right, what? Like, I speak to my mum about macro splits. She goes, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So you kind of like going, well, what's the difference? We're
Yeah.
still making it confusing whether you go with a PT or Slimming World. So I've talked about the downside of free foods because I feel it's unlimited does cause a bit of an issue. And I actually knew someone that used to come to work with the biggest tub of pasta you've ever seen. And it was, well, this is a free food. I can eat as much as I want. And you go, I get, technically, yes, they are saying that. But, so that is a bit of an issue. So, we'll agree on that one. But I wanted to look at the pros and cons of it. So the pros of someone being part of a Slimming World based diet group is you've got a community aspect. You've got accountability.
Yeah.
You've got skin in the game because you've paid to be a member. And you're making sure basically someone is focusing on their nutrition, which is always a good thing.
You've got a plan.
Yes. You've got some sort of structure instead of just stumbling around in the darkness and this kind of thing. I think one of the things as well is like Slimming World trying to encourage you to see your plate as, how you see those plates with like this much will be your fruits and veg, this is your proteins, which again, structure, very good. I like that. The downsides of it is a bit like you mentioned earlier, Tim, in that depending on which group you go to and who is running that group, there is no requirement for the person who's running the group to be any form of educated nutritional, know. It could just be someone that's done it and they like it and they're trying to encourage their ways. So if you've got someone who's kind of cheated with it or that kind of thing, they'll then pass on their bad habits and it's that's not good.
I actually had a client who was in Slimming World, then became a leader, I think they call them, instructor, and then she entered it and she was like, I kind of know a lot of this stuff that I was saying before isn't quite right. But as you say, different groups do it different ways.
But you also, what was I going to say? Yeah, you've also got sometimes there's a bit of a toxic behavior in terms of relying on the result on the scale to determine how well you're doing. So I know from people that I've spoken to, there's people who go on the scales, don't see the weight they want, so they take a belt off or they take their shoes off and this kind of stuff. And it's,
it's also it's absolute madness to weigh yourself at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's so variable. It's
however,
okay, go on.
There are a number of meetings that because there's one local here and they do it in the morning.
Okay.
So again, I think there's some of this that's group dependent. I agree with you. If you go to one at 6 o'clock, you're gonna have a day's worth of food, you're gonna have a day's worth of poo, water, fluids, all this kind of stuff in you. So if someone was going to do it, I'd probably encourage someone to do a morning one to get a truer reflection. And the reason I wanted to sort of talk through this and kind of give a bit of an overview is, again, I'm not saying they're optimal. I'm not saying they're great. I don't fully support them, but they've become a bit of an easy target in social media and the nutrition space to the point that I think we'd almost put people off. Now, some people say that's a good thing, but I always think back to people like my mum.
Yeah.
Because that's who I try and target my social media stuff at. It's just the average person with little knowledge. And I always kind of think that if she says to me, oh, do you know what? I've realised I've put a bit of weight on. I'm thinking of going to Slimming World or whatever. What do you think? I can have two options there.
Yeah.
I can either go, what on earth are you doing? They're shit. Don't go to them. They're terrible. Or I can go, that's really positive that you are taking a stand on where you are and making that decision to join, and I fully support you. But what I will say first, before you go, let's just have a chat so I can explain how it works.
Yeah.
Explain that they don't hold the magic potion in terms of weight loss. What they're doing is they're encouraging you to eat in a certain way they are getting you to track calories, but just they're not saying it.
Yeah.
And then off you go, enjoy yourself, stick to it. And then when you get to a point where you feel that you've reached a weight where you're comfortable or you don't want to carry on with that anymore, come back and see me and we'll have another chat about how, you know, you can continue that without paying X. I think it's literally like £5 a week.
Yeah, so that's the other thing that is actually a little bit. There's a low barrier to entry, which like
and I think that's
nobody's paying me £5 a week for nutrition coaching. I wouldn't be able to.
And I think that's the thing. You know, you've got these people on social media who've got a GCSE in PE and are wearing Gymshark, and they're telling people don't spend £5 a week on Slimming World. Pay me £30 a week, and I'll give you a macro split and confuse the shit out of you.
Yeah,
and I've been a massive person against Slimming World in the past, but I'm starting to see it from a different point of view. And I'm telling people, stop being negative about something that actually does help quite a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to look at more at where people aren't necessarily where you think they are when they come to you.
Mm-hmm.
You think they've got this knowledge, they haven't.
Mm-hmm.
They're struggling and they just want someone to help them. And now if that's Slimming World, go and do it because you're, you know. And I wanted to. Have you ever seen the mashed banana thing?
Right, yes, so I've got a little story about the mashed banana thing. So when I used to work in an office, there was a guy who was doing Slimming World, and I was like the group that we worked together in. I was chatting to one of the other guys, and he's like, "What are you doing the weekend?" And I was studying for BTN, so I was telling him all about that and how I was studying nutrition in my spare time. And he was like, "Oh, it's quite interesting." So then, obviously, everyone knew me as the nutrition guy in the office. And the guy who's doing Slimming World is having good success with it. And again, it's like that community stuff, and he'd done really well with it. So did other people in his family. And he was like, I can't get my head around one thing that they're telling me to do. I was like, because we were talking, he was like, I was like ice cream. He was talking about ice cream and wanting like a bigger portion of ice cream. And I was like, oh, what I like to do, and I got it from Jamie Oliver, is I'll grab a bunch of frozen cherries, stick them in the food processor, blitz them till they're like a crumb, and chuck in a load of Greek yogurt, blitz it again, turns into frozen yogurt. And like, you can't freeze it again because it goes like an ice block. But if you eat it there and then, it's pretty good frozen yogurt. And he was like, yeah, but my Slimming World leader said to me, if I do that, it, what do you say, it oxidizes the fruit. And I was like, okay, what do you think happens when you chew it? And he was like, exactly.
So the one thing I would say about the banana thing, because I can remember years ago when I saw this come out and I was going, what on earth is this all about? Like, you chew a banana, blah, 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 blah. And I've seen a lot of people jump on this. And again, it's a bit of an easy thing to kick because it's like, it sounds stupid.
But what they're saying is don't blitz up your food and make it easier to overeat.
This is the thing. So I started to look into it a bit more. And this is why it's similar to if I was saying to someone, you know, do a food diary, write down some stuff. My thing would always be, you know, stuff like fruit and veg. Don't worry about it. Just
same.
Eat it as and when. However, I wouldn't want you to track an orange, but I do want you to track orange juice.
Yeah.
Both the same thing.
Yeah.
But one, you know you're eating an orange, and there's only so much of that you can eat. A glass of orange juice can be 4, 5, 6 oranges, which then mount up to be however many calories. So if you mash a banana, you're taking away the physical cue that you're eating
satiation of it,
one banana. And you can nail 4 or 5 bananas in no time if you mash it. So this bit frustrates me as well, because people jump on this on social media and start mocking it. And as soon as I see that, I go, you don't get it. Like, step away from joining in with the herd and just think about it for a minute, what they're actually trying to say. And when you start to think about it, you go, no, there is sense in that. There isn't sense in the thing that he did where I think they called a Muller yogurt a free food. And then they bought out their own yogurts and all of a sudden they were 4 sins. So it's like, I don't know how, like the product didn't change. I don't know how you can just be in free food and then be sins because you bought out your own yogurts. So there are things in there I don't agree with. But yeah, I think, like I said at the start, to bookend it, it's not perfect.
The thing you get a structure, but you don't get an education, and you might not want an education intuitively. You might just want to get to that goal. The problem is when you step away from the program, you don't know necessarily why you shouldn't put a banana in your smoothie. You don't know necessarily why that thing is 3 sins.
Yeah. I completely agree with.
That's the bit that makes it a little bit unsustainable.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm not blowing up, but I prefer to educate someone, because then, to be frankly honest, I don't write meal plans. I don't know, that's a good, like, I might give an example, but I would rather the person be empowered to know how to put together one themselves with my help, because then they have free will. And what happens when we have free will? We go do stuff of our own volition because no one's telling us why. And we understand why we want a high protein breakfast, because that 100-calorie special K bar ain't going to fill you up.
Yeah. And I think I do agree with that. Education is the best way to go with it. So if someone comes and says they want to lose weight, if you can educate them, they can go off and, the problem we've got is that not everyone wants to be educated.
Of course. Yeah, I completely agree with
that. Because someone just wants to lose weight. And someone wants to lose weight because they're going on holiday in July.
Yeah.
The hope is they lose weight, it makes them feel good, and they'll come back and they'll go, oh, do you know what? I want to carry this on. Possibly they won't.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
It's almost like Slimming World kind of gets a bit of an abuse because people lose weight, and then the minute they stop, they put all the weight back on and go, see, that's what I told you, Slimming World doesn't work.
But the minute you stop doing any form of
studies
structured
show
eating,
that happens with any form of diet. So it's not just that. So it's
even calorie. Yeah.
I think that the final point on it, and what I just mentioned previously, is we have to start as people who are interested in helping people with their nutrition. Stop lambasting and almost like mocking their choice when they make one. Yeah, we should be support when they decide to make that choice, which is already hard for someone that is in that situation. We have to support them. It might not be the route we want them to go down, but let's help them in whatever route they go down. And I just get the feeling that sometimes people mock it because these people are going to competition and they're not going to them. I don't have I give advice for free. I don't get any money, so I've got no kind of,
So the way I see it actually is I'm there for later on when if and when they make that decision of Slimming World isn't working for them.
You want to be the person that when they go,
100%.
Actually, I've got to a point where I'd like to know more. I spoke to Tim once and he was really supportive and I really appreciate that. I'm going to go and speak to him. And you can go, great, come to me, we'll have a chat and we'll get you going. But that's, slightly an alternative view on slimming clubs.
I like it.
And it's not, I'm not going to be starting to post, healthy extra foods on my social media or anything like that. But I always like to try and be supportive of people who are doing it.
So, you know what though? Actually, like something like if you look at something like Weight Watchers or WW, whatever they call themselves anymore, I think there is some solid research that says that is actually a very effective group program. Yeah,
and I was actually looking on PubMed this afternoon. I should have been working, so don't tell people, but I was on PubMed. And if you just type in Google Slimming World PubMed, it brings you also up all the articles that you want to see. And when you start reading the research, I think they were doing ones in terms of the impact on men in Slimming World, because Slimming World has always been seen as a female-led thing. Actually, if you put men in group situations where there's a community, the results are very good.
Yeah.
And all the research I was looking at, the results are positive. And it just niggles in the back of your mind going, at some point we have to stop mocking this.
Yeah. It's a place to get started.
Yeah,
Go get started in the place that makes the most sense for you. Like if we were to
feel
say,
comfortable. Yeah,
if someone wanted to if their New Year's resolution was to become more active, and they decided they wanted to go for a 20-minute walk, you wouldn't go tell them they're an idiot because they're not deadlifting and squatting and entering a CrossFit competition. It would be balmy.
yeah. But unfortunately, there's people out there that are doing it to try and. I just think I think it annoys me because it's just like it's herd mentality, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Someone goes, "Oh,
Groupthink.
this is shit," and it's like no one thinks for themselves and actually goes, "You know what? I'm going to go away and look at this and actually make my own opinion." And that's the thing that does get me a bit with the social media kind of side of things. But yeah, that was my slightly passionate.
That's good. I like it.
View on
passionate. Yeah, passionate. Look out for Nick becoming a slimming world leader in the next 6 months.
I'm going to get a t-shirt.
You'll be wearing your devil horns on the next podcast. It'll be brilliant.
So I think of actually rocking up at the local. We've got one around the corner. I'm going to rock up there on a morning with a clipboard, start taking names down.
I would actually on the group thing, I would love to. I don't necessarily have the capacity or know where I would do it, but I would love to run a small group slimming club and do it my way, which would involve some of the stuff that Slimming World do. I wouldn't do some of the stuff that I'd do other bit. I would do it like I'd coach my regular clients. Much like you, Nick, my unlimited stuff is I basically say to my clients, I'm going to track calories and protein if you're up for that. That's it. And if it's a vegetable that isn't a potato, we don't track it.
Yeah.
So I can eat 7 kilos of peas. Well, you can try. But I give them that freedom, abundance mindset. I explain to them that that's because veg is really, really filling and very low in calorie.
Yeah. But the thing that made me laugh as well is like I said, it has become a bit of an easy target, and people think, okay, well, I'll move away from that and I'll speak to the PT in my gym or whatever, to try and get advice.
Let's make this really.
This week alone, I've seen the PT that works in my gym has posted stuff to the effect of sugar is the equivalent of cocaine,
which is bullshit.
Which is absolute bullshit. Apparently, the minute you sit down, your body turns off fat burning.
Right.
So the minute I sat down for this podcast, my body just shut off any fat burning ability. And it's like, well, okay, are you telling people to not go in that direction, but go to you, and you're equally as shit?
Nick, so as a guy who I think Josh has done a different, like I did a quite a cheap level 3 personal trainer course. I've done my BTN, which is level 4 nutrition. I won't name who they are, but I had to point out to them that one of their nutritional statements was factually incorrect. They'd mixed up the difference between water-soluble vitamins and fat-soluble vitamins completely. And I was like, someone is going to read that, because that's all the nutrition stuff you get is a small amount of your level 3 personal trainer qualification, and you're qualified to give people nutrition advice, which isn't a bad thing. A lot of it is solid. It's very, very simple. It doesn't go into mindset or anything like that you cover in a higher level course. But I was like, someone's going to read that and advise their client of that, and it's dangerous and wrong. That's like right to them, and they're a bit sheepish and embarrassed. I will tell the examining board, but I was like, how to get past? How has it got so far? It's not a new course. How has it got so far before somebody spotted it and told them? But maybe that's because laziness, apathy, whatever. But I was like, God. So that tells you a little bit about the basic level of education you get as a personal trainer. That doesn't mean every personal trainer is like that, because a lot of them would go and do their own research and learn on the job and all the applied stuff that comes with it, read PubMed like Nick's doing, all that stuff. But just like there are plenty of GPs out there who would recommend the fast 500 diet, or whatever it's fast 800 diet, unfortunately, well-meaningly, but they're not experts in nutrition either. But some would go and do the yards and do that. So it's tough, isn't it? Because how do you know? You don't know what you don't know.
The message is, if you're someone listening to this and you want nutritional advice, look up us free.
Yeah.
Ignore everyone else. Just come to us.
Yeah,
We'll do it.
Give you 600 followers yet, Nick?
Oh, do you know what? I nearly got there.
Did you?
Nearly got there. Yeah.
Right, we need another push.
Well, I got up to 598.
Yeah.
And then I did a story that slightly criticised the Labour Party, and I lost 2 followers.
Was it Keir Starmer? He stopped following you.
Yeah, that was it basically. Yeah. So I think lesson learned there: don't talk politics on my stories.
I don't think I've ever seen you. Anyway, right.
I think I was talking about they're on about banning junk food adverts before 9 p.m. They've break that one back up again, and I was saying it was a bit of a lazy approach.
Recycle. Okay. Right. Well, actually, we have had our very first question into the podcast, which is we'll open the bottles of champagne. There's a ticker tape parade going out in the street. You can't see it behind me. People are excited. So thank you for Chris, who asked the question. Chris was looking for some ideas for savoury snacks. And I can kind of see why that is, because I think like average snack product, especially like in the health realm, tends to be on the sweeter side. And I think personally as well, I find a high protein savoury snack a little bit hard to come by, especially in sort of the pre-packaged version. So I know Nick spends a lot of time in Aldi pointing out all the stuff, but with Josh's culinary hat on, I thought he could absolutely nail this subject. So over to you, Josh.
So a very simple one. If you like eating chicken, buy a whole chicken, roast it, and if there's any left over, then that's easy pickings for getting good savoury protein throughout the day. Same thing when it comes to meat. If you get a big piece of meat, same sort of thing, but then you can look at slightly cheaper cuts as well. So, for instance, beef skirt from Sainsbury's, they vary in pricing, but generally under £5 majority of the time, and there's quite a lot of meat in that pack. And if you happen to have an air fryer, there are some that have the function of dehydrate on it, so you can make your own beef jerky or any kind of jerky you like.
That's game changing. I did
exactly.
Not know.
So you can thinly slice the meat, season it any which way you like, whack it in there, and then it cooks for several hours on a low, slow heat. And then when you come to take it out of the drawer, you've got jerky that you've made yourself. And so, say if you bought 3 packs of beef skirt, did what I just said, and then you've got a good amount of snacking material for duration of the week. And you can also do organ meats as well. There's one time I managed to get some venison liver. So
nice.
Obviously, liver's an acquired taste for some people, but it makes really nice jerky too, and the bioavailability of the nutrients in that is also great as well. Just a big bloody ultra multivitamin. And
nice. I like that.
Yeah, and so that's one thing. For a vegetarian or plant-based thing, take a can of chickpeas, drain them, dry them, and there was one recipe I tried out where you add a tablespoon's worth of tahini and then some black sesame seeds, some paprika, sea salt. I find with quite a lot of vegetarian or vegan stuff, they under-season things, so
okay, that's a good tip.
Season the hell out of it with some additional things in there, depending if you want like some spice or a herby sort of thing, and then either whack them in the oven or an air fryer, and it's kind of like wasabi peas to a degree.
Yeah, nice.
That's a similar sort of texture, but you're getting fiber, carbs, some protein in there, and they're tasty too. And then a third thing, this is kind of almost like a brunchy breakfast sort of thing, but a crustless quiche, basically. So
yeah,
you take eight eggs, maybe 10 eggs or something like that. Crack them into a bowl along with 2 to 3 tablespoons of cottage cheese, and whisk that all up into so everything's combined. Salt and pepper it, and then get a muffin tray. I should probably preface this as well. On the side, saute some spring onions, peppers, a deli meat of your choice, so ham, turkey, whatever you want. Saute that off, and then divvy that up into the muffin tray, and then add the cottage cheese egg mix to that. Bake them in the oven, and that's another good one.
Nice.
Try out.
I think I'd add to that 2 mini Baby Bell Lights is quite an easy one.
Yeah.
Quite high in protein, low in fat, low in calories relatively. Cheese is actually quite satiating in terms of the feeling of fullness. Sorry, Josh.
Parmesan in particular as well, because it's kind of classified as one of those raw cheeses, and even if people have lactose intolerance, that's really low in lactose too, so you can still tolerate that one.
Mozzarella is quite good as well. It's quite high in protein, lower in fat as well. I did not know that you could do jerky in an air fryer. I'm now changed my opinion on air fryers entirely, and I'm off to buy one. There's some of that stuff is available pre-packaged as well if you're in that.
Yeah, like if you're on the go, or there's a particular brand called Ember.
I love Ember. I was about to mention
EMBER, and they do beef jerky, they do venison jerky, different flavors, and they all taste really good. So
they do a pork one.
Oh, right, okay.
It tastes like salami, but hasn't got anywhere near the amount of fat in. It's like it's like the same macros as chicken, so it's very, very low in fat. They put a little bit of quinoa in there, I think.
All right.
But it tastes like salami. It's insane. You'll find them in the chiller aisle, so they're not they will last outside of the fridge, but not long because they're chilled. But and they're a UK company. I think they're all organic, probably. And it's high welfare animals, and they are basically using up all the bits that you wouldn't otherwise eat. So it's quite a sustainable way to eat, very regenerative if you're conscious of the environmental impact of what you're eating.
There's another company called Roam, ROA.
Okay.
I've yet to try them. They're again UK based, and I haven't seen them in any stores yet, but they are mail order. And it's a similar thing to Ember, but rather than being just individual slices of jerky, they're like meat bars basically.
Nice.
And they're seasoned for different tastes and stuff like that, but they look pretty good too.
There's also the Eat Lean cheeses, which is a little bit like an Edam. Now, it doesn't taste like your favorite block of double mature cheddar or whatever you're into, but it's insanely high in protein, and a really good savory protein source. And I think they've actually just brought out some bars rather than buying. So I used to buy a block and chop it up into bars. So they've obviously cottoned onto that and just wrapped them up in a packet and done that. So there's another option of a pre-packaged one. So yeah, a few ideas like to work on there. If you were to, I'm going to go shameless plug. If you were to go to my website and look under the freebies section, I've got a high protein snack guide that's got a bunch of different ideas in there. If you want to contact me on Instagram, I can send you the link to go download it. Right, and we'll do Instagram tags at the end, so make people listen to the end. That's my plan.
Can I add one final snack thing on the end of it? I go a bit old school sometimes. If I finish work and I'm a bit hungry, I go a bit old school and possibly a bit 80s. I get some Ryvita and put some pineapple cottage cheese on.
And
I think it's the crunch and the slightly sweet, salty of the cottage cheese. It's quite nice.
Yeah,
and obviously cottage cheese is pretty cheap.
Very cheap, very high in protein. Yeah, very filling. Yeah,
so that's always a tasty one.
Yeah, if you can get over the texture, cottage cheese is really good.
Yeah.
I'm also off to buy some pineapple cottage cheese and just upset my wife.
Pineapple cottage cheese in an air fryer. Weekend.
I wonder, maybe, let's go like pineapple cottage cheese fritters. That was proper 80s, I reckon. Child of the 80s, fine. Josh is just glazing over. He's child of the 90s. You are a child of the 90s, aren't you, Josh? You're not going to tell me.
I am, yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Very good. Okay.
What year in the 90s was it?
1990.
Oh, that's not too bad.
Oh, that's all right. That's
That's
acceptable.
okay. Yeah.
Right. Well, to wrap it up, I'm going to do a little bit about social media trends. So I see it a lot at the minute, and it was brewing up before Christmas, possibly before then. Definitely Mr. Spector's banging the drum. Rogan Chatterjee's been on it, although as I understand it, I haven't listened to the full podcast. He gives a lot more context, which I was pleased to hear. Lots of people are saying avoid processed foods. Seems smart, a bit like this, bashing the Slimming World thing. Seems like the thing to do. And where that might help you is that having some bright lines or some red lines and some clarity of eat these things, don't eat that, might help you to make better decisions, because the more variety we have and the more options that present us, and let's face it, you could walk into Sainsbury's and there are literally, I reckon there's probably 70 different types of cheese in that cheese aisle if you went and counted them. Right. Too much variety leads to basically the want to have everything, try a little bit of everything. So if you say, I'm going to avoid X, it does work, or I'm going to limit X, it does work and give you that clarity. Many processed foods are hyper palatable, which means they're fucking tasty. Hyper fucking palatable, tasty. They're really easy to overeat. That's not the dictionary definition. That's my attempt at being funny. They're very, very easy to overeat. What happens when something's easy to overeat? You eat more of it. And if that also happens to be high in calories, then it affects our waistline. That being said, processed foods, and you can get snarky and pedantic over like the definition, could be a bunch of different stuff. So what a lot of the people will say, it's hyper processed foods, but there isn't really a line in the sand as to what is and what isn't processed. If you were to pick up your potato, whip the skin off with your speed peeler, bang it in the air fryer and make some chips, that is a processed food, despite the fact that you could have just dug it up from your garden. And so we've got to be careful with this terminology. And what I don't like about it is it cuts through a few things that aren't fundamental. And it's an attempt, I think, to tackle a bigger issue of the fact that we live in this obesogenic environment where food is available literally everywhere. I mean, probably, I don't know, not many years ago in the grand scheme of the world, we would be out in the woods hunting our lunch by hand, and we might not eat day to day, whereas you could literally stumble across 4,000 calories around the corner from your house, like very easily. We can't change a lot of that. And it might be an attempt to say, let's get all these foods out of the supermarkets and stuff. But in reality, that ain't going to happen. And a lot of those foods are very, very cheap to eat. And sugar gets a massive rap. I think we talked about it earlier, didn't we, Nick? That sort of statement from the PT was like, sugar is toxic, or sugar is as addictive as it isn't. Okay. Like, food isn't addictive in the definition, the scientific definition of it, right? We have to eat to live. And if you don't, you die, right? So yes, it's addictive in that form, but it's a survival thing. When you eat a cube of sugar, your body breaks it down into glucose. Sugar is very close to glucose already. When you eat a potato, your body breaks it down into glucose. Your potato is further away from glucose because it has lots of starch and fiber in it. So your body has to break it down a bunch of different times, which causes it to digest more slowly. But when it's that molecule of glucose, your body doesn't know any different. So to fearmonger about stuff being overly processed is missing a bigger point. It is all about calories. Unfortunately, you don't have to track them. Having fewer higher palatable junky foods in your diet is obviously going to be better for your weight management and all of that stuff. Having less salt in your diet is going to be better if you eat a heavily processed diet. But if you cook like Josh and cook for yourself all of the time, not putting any salt on your food is also bad for you. It's all about balance. So if 80% of your foods were what you would consider to be healthy intuitively, and you're going to be, regardless of your level of nutrition knowledge, you're going to be quite close to the mark on that. We sometimes overcomplicate this. The other 20% can literally be whatever you like. And again, like another guy that I follow, nutritionist Alan Aragon, he's one of the bigger researchers in the nutrition space. He likes to give his clients, get them to make their own meal plan. So he sort of sets out their calorie target, and then he breaks that down into what foods that might be. So it'd be like this much meat or this much tofu, this many carbohydrates, whether that's X grams of potato, X grams of rice. So breaks all that down, and then he saves like 20% of their calories and says that those 300, 400 calories of your target, eat whatever you like. Structure, but also freedom, and not too much freedom. So last bit around that, it's a helpful tip for you. If you want to control your calories but not track calories, figure out how many you need. Just Google it. Like, there isn't a perfect equation, or ask one of us through our social channels. We'll do it for you, or I will. Take your best guess, figure it out. And let's say you've got 1,800 calories as your target. Figure out 3 meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that are 500 calories. Use the rest for a couple of hundred calories of fruit, and the rest for chocolate, crisps, ice cream, whatever makes your life enjoyable, even alcohol if you want to do that. Then you don't need to count calories, but you will have to do a little bit of work up front, associate what your portion sizes are, and then you could rinse and repeat. And you could use Nick's example last week of the recipe jar. Of when you pick that recipe, figure out what the portions are to give you that amount of calories, and then, okay, a little bit of upfront investment, but your portions and everything are going to be right. Okay, it changes when you go out, but either go out and enjoy that meal, or use the restaurant calorie information to help you if you want to stay more on track.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think the talk around processed foods is like it's an important one, isn't it? Because it is it's the other topic of getting bashed again. And I did a post on processed foods a while back. Shameless plug, just if you can. I don't know if you can see it, but no, you can't.
Oh, you're blurry, not helping now.
Yeah, blurry. But it's on my Instagram, which I'll give you at the end. So I did a post on saying, should you fear processed foods? And it's interesting because there's something called the NOVA food classification system where it comes to processed foods. And it's like there's 4 groups, and it starts from unprocessed or minimally processed foods at the start. It's basically like pick fruit and veg, up until ultra processed foods, which is like takeaways and stuff like that. So that helps give you, when people say processed foods, they can fall into different categories. So like we're saying, not all processed foods are necessarily bad. And one of the things I read in relation to processed foods, there's a report that was called the Food Foundation Broken Plate 2023 report.
Okay.
And it actually talks a lot about the impact of processed foods that it has on people that are less fortunate.
Yes.
Because processed food bashing
is not helping.
I don't want to sound a bit, rah-rah, but it's very elitist.
It is. I'm massively with you on this.
You need to be eating this quality of food, because if you're not, you're subhuman. You're not going to live. It's like, no, I'm sorry, but some people don't have a fucking choice.
Yeah.
Like in the report, they work out the people that are living in parts of London where you're on a high street, they do not have access to fruit and veg. So where people are going, oh, of course you can just go and buy tomatoes and stuff. Literally, they can't. They have no access to vehicles. They have no access to shops. Their high street is covered in fried chicken shops. What do you want them to do? Like, oh, we'll just move.
Well, also
I hate this.
The other aspect of that is they might be working 2 jobs to support themselves and their family, so that then go buy the stuff and cook it at home. Yeah, sure. I've just done a 12-hour shift, and then I'm in bed for 4, and then I go do another job.
Yeah, because I think I pulled out 3 things. So there's a couple of quotes in it. Said it's often those on the lowest incomes who consume more processed foods. The most deprived 1/5 of UK households would need to spend an estimated 50% of their disposable income to eat in line with the Eat Well guide, compared to 11% of the least deprived. So you can just see the impact in terms of going fresh for families who are struggling.
Yeah.
It's just not a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And on average, it actually works that healthy foods are over twice as expensive as less healthy foods per calorie.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like, if someone's up for reading that report, the Broken Plate 2023 report is actually really interesting because it talks through a lot of it. And I think it definitely changed my viewpoint of, again, I feel like it's something that's come up a lot on this podcast, is you need to meet people where they are.
Yeah.
And some people are struggling.
So our nutrition lecturer suggested in my year, he was like, you guys should all go and read the book Poverty Safari by this Scottish guy. And the guy who lived in poverty came in and out of it. He was like a rapper, so he managed to get like a bit of fame and a bit of money, and then he was in and out. But just reading stuff in the book, you're like, Jesus, I live such a privileged existence. And you never know unless you push yourself to go read something like that you possibly wouldn't. The other point with the processed food thing is, so Nick touched on it a little bit there. So a lot of the research will show that processed food leads to a poor health outcome. But a lot of people on a low income have to eat that way because they're on a low income. They might have a lot of stress in their life. They might be working multiple jobs. They might not sleep very well. They might not have access to as good a healthcare system. They might not have access to going to the gym. All of this stuff a lot of us take for granted. Just because their diet isn't stacked up to clean eating, it might not be the food. It's very, very easily the stress, the lifestyle they live in, even access to like sanitation and stuff like that shortens their life. It doesn't have to be the food. So it's where research is, you have to take it with a grain of salt and think very, very laterally about it. It's never just one thing. Yeah.
It's like those studies you used to see, like red meat increases your chance of cancer, but then actually you look at it and the people that were consuming the most red meat, there was also a link to the fact that they were the highest smokers and
alcohol.
Sort of just like there's all these other factors. But that goes back to the whole thing of people are jumping on comments.
Yeah,
and it just shows you the basic level of knowledge that's out there. Is people aren't looking outside of headlines.
Yeah,
it's like the best thing that we learned from BTN was critical thinking. Is see a headline that doesn't quite make sense. I'm going to go investigate it instead of just sharing it regardless. And that's, question things.
Be curious.
Right, Ace. I think good discussion, guys. Let's wrap it there. Firstly, right, where can people find you on social media? Nick can get you up to 600 plus followers.
I've had a follower join this podcast.
Incredible.
We're nearly there. Get me there, guys. Metcalf_nutrition, and it's Metcalf without an E at the end. So METCALF_nutrition.
Perfect. And what one thing would you like people to take away from this pod, Nick?
I'm going with the Josh air fryer tip of making your own jerky, because I've got an air fryer and I will be doing that probably this weekend.
There you
go. Josh, where can people find you?
At Josh Weabout90, so WIBAUT, my surname. On Instagram. That's the only social media really I have at the moment.
Nice. And then what was your take-home point?
The meeting people where they're at, basically, because I've found, and also changing my disposition about things. Like, it kind of ties into what we were talking about a little bit last week from the philosophy side of things. And much like you, Nick, when some people I know have signed up to Slimming World in a previous version of me, I would have thought, why are you doing that? That's a stupid idea. It doesn't work, etc., etc. But like you say, it's the entry point is something that a lot of people can get on, and it's of starting their journey, and then hopefully following their initial curiosity and doing that in the first place, it might lead them to other channels like this or others that will help them on that particular path. Because as I talked about at the beginning of the pods, getting a number of people's food diaries in, rather than looking at it and thinking, oh, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, is finding the wins that they're already doing without much information, and then rather than focusing on one negative aspect, because if you make a big deal out of that, that's the only thing they'll focus on.
Mm-hmm.
So you're wanting to, like you say, empower them to build their own philosophy about how to eat, basically. And yeah, that's one of the main things I've taken away from today.
Perfect. Right, over to me then. Sorry, Nick, do you want to say?
No, that was me.
No, okay. Here's something in the background. Okay, seamless. Right, over to me. You can find me at Food Flexibility on Instagram, Facebook, website foodflexibility.co.uk. My take home would be, if you struggle to manage your appetite, maybe explore eating a little bit more protein at breakfast, lunch, and dinner without changing anything else, and just see how you go. And on that note, remember, carbs won't make you fat. Calories might. Protein probably won't. And we'll see you again next week.
Yep.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.